The frozen river claimed its victim without warning, and Yates Zimmerman threw himself from his saddle before his mind could catch up with his body. The woman's scream cut through the January air like a bullet, sharp and terrifying, before the ice swallowed her whole. Yates hit the riverbank running, his boots sliding on the snow-covered ground as he tore off his heavy coat and gun belt. The Smoky Hill River outside Hays City, Kansas had frozen over weeks ago, but the unseasonably warm morning must have weakened the ice near the center where the current ran fastest. He could see her dark hair spreading like ink beneath the surface, her pale hands clawing at the underside of the ice. Without hesitation, Yates ran across the frozen expanse, feeling the ice groan beneath his weight. 20 feet from shore, he dropped to his belly and crawled, distributing his weight as his father had taught him years ago. The woman had stopped moving. Yates reached the jagged hole where she had fallen through and plunged his arms into water so cold it felt like knives cutting into his skin. His fingers found fabric, then an arm, and he hauled with everything he had. Her head broke the surface, lips blue, eyes closed. He dragged her onto the ice and immediately heard the ominous crack beneath them. There was no time to be careful. Yates pulled her into his arms and stood, running for the shore as the ice fractured in a spider web pattern around them. His boot broke through once, soaking his leg to the knee in frigid water, but momentum carried him forward. 3 more steps and he was on solid ice, then 2 more and his boots hit the snowy bank. The woman was not breathing. Yates laid her flat and pressed on her chest the way an army doctor had shown him during his brief stint as a ranch hand near Fort Hays. Water gushed from her mouth. He pressed again, counted, pressed again. Her lips were turning gray. "Come on," he muttered, pressing harder. "Come on, damn it." She convulsed suddenly, choking up river water onto the snow. Yates turned her on her side as she retched and gasped, her whole body shaking violently. He grabbed his coat from where he had dropped it and wrapped it around her soaking dress, then scooped her back into his arms. His horse, a reliable bay gelding named Copper, had stayed ground tied nearby. Yates managed to get himself and the woman into the saddle, her body pressed against his chest, as he urged Copper into a fast trot toward town. She was conscious but not speaking, her teeth chattering so hard he could hear them clicking together. Her wet hair was already starting to freeze into icicles. Hays City was a rough frontier town, barely 4 years old in this winter of 1871, but it had a doctor. Yates guided Copper straight down Main Street, ignoring the stares from townspeople as he stopped in front of Doc Morrison's office. He dismounted with the woman still in his arms and kicked the door open. "Doc," he shouted. An older man with wire spectacles emerged from a back room, took one look at the situation, and pointed to an examination table. "Get her over here. What happened?" "Fell through the ice on the Smoky Hill," Yates said, laying her down gently. "She was under for maybe a minute, not breathing when I got her out." Doc Morrison was already working, peeling away the wet coat and dress with practiced efficiency. "Miss, can you hear me? What is your name?" The woman's eyes fluttered open. They were brown, Yates noticed, a deep brown like rich soil after rain. Her gaze found his face and stayed there as the doctor continued his examination. Diana," she managed through chattering teeth. "Diana B. Brennan. Well, Miss Brennan, you are very lucky this young man was nearby. Let's get you warm." Doc Morrison looked at Yates. "There are blankets in that cabinet, bring them all." For the next hour, Yates found himself acting as the doctor's assistant, fetching hot water from the stove, helping to wrap Diana in warm blankets, holding a cup of hot tea steady while she sipped. Doc Morrison confirmed she had no broken bones and her lungs seemed clear. though he warned she needed to stay warm and dry for the next few days to avoid pneumonia. Only when Diana had stopped shaking and some color had returned to her face did she really look at Yates. He was standing near the door, preparing to leave now that she was stable when her voice stopped him. "Wait," she said. Her voice was still hoarse but clearer now. "Please." He turned back. Up close, even bedraggled and exhausted, she was beautiful. Not in the painted way of the saloon girls who worked along Main Street, but with an honest, open beauty that made his chest feel tight. "You saved my life," Diana said. She pushed herself up on her elbows despite Doc Morrison's protests. Her eyes locked onto Yates with an intensity that pinned him in place. "Why did you risk your life?" The question caught him off guard. Yates stood there, his own clothes still damp and cold, his hands raw and red from the freezing water, and could not think of a single reasonable answer. Why had he risked his life? He did not know her. She could have been anyone. "Could not stand by and watch someone die," he finally said. It was the truth, just not all of it. Even in that split second of decision, something had compelled him forward with an urgency he did not understand. Diana stared at him for a long moment. "That ice could have killed you. That water could have killed you. You did not think twice about it, did you?" "No, madam, I did not, Mr." She waited for his name. "Yates Zimmerman. Most folks call me Yates." "Mr. Zimmerman, I believe I owe you my life. I do not know how to repay such a debt." "No debt," Yates said quickly. "Just glad you are all right. What were you doing out there alone anyway?" Diana's face clouded. "I was crossing to get to town. I am new to Hayes City. I arrived 2 days ago from Ohio, and I thought the ice looked solid enough to cross. I was wrong." She looked down at her hands. "I was supposed to meet my brother yesterday, but he never came. I went looking for him." Doc Morrison interjected, "You need rest, Miss Brennan." "Do you have lodging in town?" She nodded. "The boarding house on 3rd Street, Mrs. Kelly's place." "I will take you there once you are ready," Yates offered. "That is kind, but you have done more than enough," Diana protested. "It is no trouble. My ranch is just outside town anyway. I was coming in for supplies when I saw you fall." Yates shifted his weight. "Besides, Doc Morrison is right. You should not be alone for a while. Someone should make sure you are settled proper." Diana looked like she wanted to argue but seemed too exhausted to muster the energy. "Thank you," she said simply. 2 hours later, after Diana had been dressed in a spare set of clothes Doc Morrison kept for emergencies and declared stable enough to leave, Yates helped her onto Copper. She sat in front of him again, though this time wrapped in dry blankets and significantly more alert. The short ride to the boarding house gave him his first real chance to talk with her. "Your brother," he said as they moved slowly down the rutted street. "What is his name?" "Maybe I have seen him around." "David Brennan," Diana said. "He is a surveyor. He came out here 6 months ago for work with the railroad. His letters made Kansas sound like a place of opportunity, and after our parents died last fall, there was nothing keeping me in Ohio. He sent money for a train ticket and told me to meet him at the station, but he never showed." Yates frowned. He knew most of the railroad surveyors by sight if not by name, and the name David Brennan did not ring any bells. "You check with the railroad office. I tried yesterday." The clerk said he had not seen David in 3 weeks, said he was supposed to deliver some survey maps but never showed up. Worry crept into Diana's voice. "I do not know anyone here. I do not know where to look." "I will help you look," Yates said before he could stop himself. Diana twisted in the saddle to look at him. "Why would you do that? You have already done so much." It was a fair question. Yates barely knew this woman, had only pulled her from the river a few hours ago, yet here he was volunteering to help search for her missing brother. If his ranch hands could hear him, they would say he was being foolish. He had cattle to tend, fences to mend, 100 tasks that needed doing before the worst of winter set in. "Because it is the right thing to do," he said finally. "And because nobody should be alone in a strange town, especially not after nearly dying." Diana studied his face for a moment, then nodded slowly. "You are a good man, Yates Zimmerman." He did not know what to say to that, so he said nothing. They reached Mrs. Kelly's boarding house, a 2-story wooden structure that was one of the nicer buildings in Hayes City. Yates helped Diana down and walked her to the door. Mrs. Kelly herself answered, took one look at Diana's pale face and borrowed clothes, and immediately ushered her inside with a stream of concerned questions. "I will come by tomorrow morning," Yates called after her. "We will start looking for your brother." Diana turned in the doorway. Even exhausted and wrapped in an oversized coat, she was striking. "Thank you, Yates, for everything." He touched the brim of his hat and mounted Copper, suddenly aware of how cold and tired he was. The ride back to his ranch took 40 minutes, and by the time he arrived, the sun was starting to set. His foreman, a grizzled man named Pete, took one look at him and shook his head. "You look like hell, boss. What happened?" "Pulled a woman out of the smoky hill," Yates said, dismounting stiffly. "Ice broke under her." Pete whistled low. "She make it," she did. "Name is Diana Brennan. Just arrived from Ohio looking for her brother who seems to have gone missing." "And let me guess," Pete said, taking Copper's reins. "You volunteered to help find him." Yates shot him a look. "What would you have me do? Leave her to search alone?" "Did not say that," Pete replied, leading Copper toward the barn. "Just saying it is very like you is all. Heart bigger than your sense sometimes." Maybe Pete was right, but Yates could not bring himself to regret the decision. That night, lying in his bed in the small ranch house his father had built 20 years ago, he kept seeing Diana's face as she looked up at him from beneath the ice, her eyes wide with terror. He kept feeling the weight of her in his arms as he ran across the breaking ice, the strange certainty that he had to save her, had to reach her in time. He barely knew her, but already she occupied his thoughts in a way no woman had before. It was foolish, probably, to read anything into one dramatic rescue. She was grateful, that was all. Once they found her brother and she got settled, she would likely forget all about the cowboy who happened to be in the right place at the right time. But when sleep finally came, he dreamed of brown eyes and frozen rivers, and woke with her name on his lips. The next morning dawned clear and cold. Yates rose early, as he always did, and went about his usual chores with unusual speed. He fed the cattle, checked the water troughs, consulted with Pete about the day's work, and was saddled up by 8 o'clock. Pete watched him ride off toward town with a knowing smile that Yates chose to ignore. Diana was waiting for him on the porch of the boarding house, dressed in a simple blue dress that Mrs. Kelly must have loaned her. Her hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and though she still looked tired, the life had returned to her face. She smiled when she saw him, a real smile that lit up her whole expression. "Good morning," she called. "I was starting to think you might have reconsidered." "Told you I would come," Yates said, dismounting. "How are you feeling? Sore, tired, grateful to be alive?" Diana came down the steps carefully. "Mrs. Kelly barely let me out of bed this morning. She kept bringing me tea and soup and fussing like a mother hen." "That sounds like Mrs. Kelly." Yates smiled. "She is a good woman. You are in good hands there." "She also told me quite a bit about you," Diana said, her eyes sparkling with something that might have been amusement. "Apparently you are quite well regarded in Hayes City. Honest, hardworking, fair to your ranch hands. She said your father built the Zimmerman ranch from nothing and you have made it prosper." Yates felt heat creep up his neck. "Mrs. Kelly talks too much. I think she wanted to assure me I was in good company." Diana's expression grew more serious. She also said you are not in the habit of making promises you cannot keep. So when you said you would help me find David, you meant it." "I did mean it," Yates confirmed. "I thought we could start at the railroad office, see what records they have of your brother's last known location. Then maybe check the land office, the saloons, the general store. Someone must have seen him." They walked together down Main Street, Yates leading Copper by the reins. Hayes City was busier in the morning, with freight wagons rumbling past and townspeople going about their business. Diana walked close enough that their arms occasionally brushed, and each time it happened, Yates felt an odd jolt of awareness. The railroad office was in a small building near the depot. The clerk, a thin man with ink-stained fingers, looked up from his ledgers when they entered. "Help you folks." "We are looking for information about David Brennan," Yates said. "He is a surveyor working for the railroad. This is his sister, Diana. She came out from Ohio to meet him, but he has not shown up." The clerk's expression shifted to something that might have been sympathy. "David Brennan, yeah. Good worker when he was here. But like I told the young lady yesterday, I have not seen him in 3 weeks. He was supposed to survey a route north of here, up toward the Solomon River. Should have been back in a week, but he never returned. Did he go alone?" Diana asked, her voice tight with worry. "No, madam. Took a guide with him. A half-breed named Henry 2 Horses. Local man, knows the territory well." The clerk flipped through some papers. According to the records, they left on December 28th and were supposed to return by January 4th. Today is January 19th. That is more than 2 weeks overdue. Diana's face went pale. Yates put a steadying hand on her arm. "Did you send anyone to look for them?" The clerk shifted uncomfortably. "The railroad sent a rider up to Fort Hays to report it. The Army said they would send a patrol when they could, but with tensions with the tribes and the winter weather, it has not been a priority. Surveyors go missing sometimes out here. Sometimes they turn up, sometimes they do not." "That is my brother you are talking about," Diana said, her voice shaking with anger and fear. "Not just some name in a ledger. I understand that, madam, and I am sorry, but that is all the information I have." Yates guided Diana back outside before she could say something she might regret. She was trembling, though whether from cold or emotion he could not tell. "He could be dead," Diana whispered. "He could have been dead this whole time while I was traveling here, thinking about seeing him again, planning our future." "Hey," Yates said gently, turning her to face him. "Do not go there yet. Missing does not mean dead. Could be they had trouble and had to hole up somewhere to wait out the weather. Could be a lot of things." "You do not understand," Diana said, tears welling in her eyes. "David is all I have left. Our mother died of consumption last October. Our father followed her a month later. They always said it was his heart, but I think he just could not live without her. David is my only family in the world. If something has happened to him, I am truly alone." The desperation in her voice cut Yates to the core. Without thinking, he pulled her into his arms, holding her as she cried against his chest. People passing by gave them curious looks, but Yates did not care. Diana clung to him like he was the only solid thing in a tilting world, and he found himself making another promise he had no business making. "We will find him," Yates said firmly. "Tomorrow morning I will ride out to where he was last seen. I will find your brother, Diana. I give you my word." She pulled back just enough to look up at him. "You cannot promise that. The Army would not even go looking for him." "I am not the Army. I know this territory almost as well as any scout, and I am a decent tracker. If David and Henry 2 Horses are out there, I will find them." He meant it with a conviction that surprised even himself. Diana searched his face. "Why are you doing this? You do not know me. You do not know David. Why would you risk going out in the middle of winter to look for a stranger?" It was the second time she had asked him a version of that question, and Yates still did not have a good answer. Or rather, he had an answer but was not ready to voice it. He had spent half the night thinking about her, worrying about her, imagining what it would be like to see her smile at him the way she had that morning on Mrs. Kelly's porch. He was drawn to her in a way that defied logic, pulled by something deeper than gratitude or duty. "Because you need help," he said instead, "and because I can." Diana stared at him for a long moment, then rose on her toes and kissed his cheek. It was quick, chaste, but it sent fire through his veins. "Thank you," she said softly. "I will go with you." "Absolutely not," Yates said immediately. "It is too dangerous. The weather alone could kill you, not to mention the risk of encountering hostile tribes or wild animals. You just nearly died yesterday. And I will go mad sitting in that boarding house not knowing what is happening," Diana countered. "David is my brother. I should be there when you find him." They argued about it for the rest of the day. Yates took her to the general store where he bought supplies for the trip, and Diana insisted on buying cold-weather gear for herself. He took her to lunch at a small restaurant, and she spent the entire meal explaining why she was perfectly capable of handling a difficult journey. By evening, when he walked her back to the boarding house, he was exhausted from the circular argument. "You are the most stubborn woman I have ever met," he said, exasperated. "And you are the most overprotective man," Diana shot back, but there was no real heat in it. "Yates, please, try to see it from my side. David is all I have. I cannot sit here doing nothing while you ride off to look for him. What if something happens to you? What if you do not come back either? I will never forgive myself." That last part struck something in him. The thought of Diana worrying about him, waiting for him, was both terrifying and oddly thrilling. "I will come back," he said quietly. "I promise you that." "Then let me come with you," Diana pressed. "I can ride. I can shoot. My father taught me both. I am not some delicate city flower who will faint at the first sign of hardship." Yates looked at her stubborn, determined face and felt his resolve crumbling. It was a terrible idea. If something happened to her, he would never forgive himself. But he also understood her need to do something, to be part of the search rather than passively waiting. "If you come," he said slowly, "you follow my lead. No arguments, no debates. If I say we turn back, we turn back. Agreed?" Diana's face broke into a brilliant smile. "Agreed." "I am going to regret this," Yates muttered. They spent the next day preparing. Yates returned to his ranch and explained the situation to Pete, who predictably thought he was insane but helped him pack supplies anyway. He loaded a pack horse with extra food, blankets, ammunition, and feed for the horses. He cleaned and oiled his rifle and pistol. He plotted a route that would take them north along the trail the surveyors would most likely have followed. Diana, meanwhile, borrowed a split skirt from Mrs. Kelly's niece and packed her own small bag of essentials. Mrs. Kelly clucked and worried and tried to talk her out of going, but Diana stood firm. By the evening of their second day of preparation, everything was ready. Yates arrived at the boarding house at dawn on the third day, leading Copper and a gentle mare named Daisy that he had borrowed from a neighbor. Diana was waiting, dressed in practical traveling clothes with her hair in a long braid down her back. She looked nervous but determined. "Last chance to change your mind," Yates said, though part of him hoped she would not. Diana shook her head. "I am coming." They rode out of Hays City as the sun broke over the horizon, painting the snow-covered prairie in shades of pink and gold. It was beautiful and harsh at the same time, the kind of landscape that could kill you if you did not respect it. Yates set a steady pace, not too fast but not dawdling either. They needed to cover ground but also conserve the horse's energy. For the first few hours they rode in comfortable silence. Diana was clearly an experienced rider, sitting easy in the saddle and moving with Daisy's gait. The morning was cold but clear, their breath misting in the air. "Tell me about your ranch," Diana said eventually. "Mrs. Kelly said your father built it." "He did," Yates said, glad for the conversation. "Came out here in '49 during the gold rush, but he never made it to California. Got as far as Kansas and decided he liked the look of the land. Started with 100 head of cattle and a lot of dreams. Built it up slow over the years. When he died 5 years ago, he left it to me." "I am sorry about your father," Diana said. "Were you close?" "We were. He was a hard man but fair. Taught me everything I know about ranching, about treating people right, about keeping your word." Yates smiled slightly. "He would have liked you, I think. He respected people with backbone. And your mother died when I was 12. Fever took her one winter. My father never remarried. I think he loved her too much to even consider it." Yates glanced at Diana. "Like your father with your mother." Diana nodded. "They had that kind of love, the kind you read about in books. When mother got sick, father was beside himself. He nursed her day and night, barely slept, barely ate. When she died, it was like something in him died too. He kept going for David and me, but his heart was not in it. When he finally passed, I think it was almost a relief for him. That must have been hard for you and David." "It was. But David is 3 years older than me, and he had already started working as a surveyor. He was practical about it, said we needed to think about the future. That is why he came out here, to make enough money that we could start fresh somewhere. And I thought—" She trailed off, her voice catching. "You thought you would have family again," Yates finished gently. "Yes," Diana whispered. "And now I might lose him before I even get to see him." "We will find him," Yates said with more confidence than he felt. They rode through the morning and into the afternoon, following the general direction the surveyors would have taken north. The land was wide open here, rolling prairie broken by occasional creek beds and stands of cottonwood trees. Snow covered everything in a white blanket that sparkled in the sunlight. It was beautiful but treacherous. The cold was constant, seeping through layers of clothing and making their faces ache. As the sun began to sink toward the horizon, Yates started looking for a suitable place to make camp. He found a spot in a small grove of trees that would provide some shelter from the wind. They had made good progress, covering perhaps 20 miles, but they were still at least a day and a half from where the surveyors were supposed to have been working. Yates set up a simple camp, while Diana gathered wood for a fire. They worked together easily, falling into a natural rhythm. Once the fire was going and the horses were tended to, they sat close to the flames and ate a simple meal of salt pork, beans, and hardtack. "This is not so bad," Diana said, warming her hands by the fire. "I thought it would be harder." "Wait until tomorrow when your muscles start protesting," Yates said with a smile. "You will be singing a different tune." "I will manage," Diana said confidently. Then more quietly, "Thank you for letting me come. I know you think it is a bad idea, but it means everything to me to be doing something." Yates looked at her across the fire. The flames lit her face in warm tones, catching gold highlights in her brown hair. She was lovely and brave, and sitting here with her felt more right than anything had in a long time. "I am glad you came," he admitted, "even if I probably should have insisted you stay behind." "Why did you give in?" Diana asked. "You do not seem like the type to be easily swayed." Yates poked at the fire with a stick, considering his answer. "Because I understood. If it was someone I cared about missing, I would want to be out here looking too, and because—" He hesitated, then decided to be honest. "Because I like having you here." Diana's eyes widened slightly. "You do?" "I do," Yates said, meeting her gaze. "You are good company, and maybe it is selfish, but I am not ready to say goodbye to you yet." The air between them seemed to thicken with unspoken possibilities. Diana bit her lip, a gesture Yates was coming to recognize as a sign she was thinking carefully about what to say. "I like being here with you too," she said finally. "When I pulled myself out of that water and saw your face, I thought you were the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. And every moment since, you have been kind and generous and so very good. I do not want to say goodbye either." Yates felt his heart hammering in his chest. He wanted to cross the fire, pull her into his arms, kiss her until neither of them could think straight. But Diana was vulnerable right now, worried about her brother, dependent on him for help. Taking advantage of that would be wrong, no matter how much he wanted her. "We should get some rest," he said, his voice rougher than he intended. "Long day tomorrow." If Diana was disappointed by his restraint, she did not show it. She simply nodded and settled into her bedroll on the other side of the fire. Yates lay in his own bedroll, staring up at the stars through the bare tree branches, and wondered if he was being noble or just a fool. The second day of riding was harder. Diana was sore, as Yates had predicted, but she did not complain. They rose at first light, ate a quick breakfast, and were back in the saddle as soon as the horses were ready. The temperature had dropped overnight, and the wind had picked up, making every mile feel twice as long. Around midday, they came across the first sign that someone had been through this way recently. A campsite, maybe 2 weeks old, with the remains of a fire and some horse droppings. "Could be them," Yates said, examining the site. "Timeline fits. 2 horses, looks like. They camped here probably for a night." "Which way did they go?" Diana asked anxiously. Yates studied the ground, finding the faint impressions of hoofprints leading north. "That way." Still heading where they were supposed to be going. They followed the trail for the rest of the day, finding another old campsite as evening approached. Yates was starting to feel more optimistic. The surveyors had made it at least this far without obvious trouble. They might well be alive, just delayed for some reason. That night's camp was colder than the first. They huddled close to the fire, sharing a single blanket for extra warmth. Diana leaned against Yates's shoulder, and he put his arm around her without thinking about it. It felt natural, necessary even, as if they had been keeping each other warm for years. "Yates," Diana said quietly, "can I ask you something?" "Of course. When you pulled me from the river, when you held me, did you feel?" She paused, searching for words. "Did you feel like you had known me before, like you recognized me somehow?" Yates's breath caught. "Yes," he admitted. "I did. I thought I was imagining it." "I felt it too," Diana said. "Even half drowned and terrified when I saw your face, I felt like I was looking at someone I had been searching for my whole life." "Does that sound insane?" "Maybe," Yates said. "But if it is insane, then we are both crazy." Diana turned in his arms to look up at him. "My mother used to say that some souls are meant to find each other, that no matter what obstacles stand in their way, they will always come together. I never really believed her until now." "Diana," Yates said, his voice low and urgent, "I need to tell you something. I am falling in love with you. I know it is too fast. I know we barely know each other, but I cannot help it. Every time I look at you, every time you smile, every time you do something brave or kind or stubborn, I fall a little more. And I know I should not be saying this now, when you are worried about your brother and dependent on me, but I cannot keep pretending I do not feel it." Diana's eyes glistened with tears. "Yates, I am falling in love with you too. I have been since you pulled me from that river. Maybe even before, in that moment when I saw you running toward me and knew you were going to try to save me. You risked everything for a stranger, and that is the kind of man I never thought I would be lucky enough to meet." This time, Yates did not hold back. He cupped her face in his cold hands and kissed her, gently at first and then with growing passion. Diana kissed him back just as fiercely, her arms wrapping around his neck. The fire crackled beside them. The wind howled through the trees, and none of it mattered because they had found each other against all odds. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Yates rested his forehead against hers. "We will find your brother," he promised again. "And then, if you are willing, I would like to court you properly. Do this right." "I would like that," Diana said, smiling through her tears. "Very much." They held each other until the fire burned low, then reluctantly separated to their bedrolls. But they slept closer that night, their hands clasped between them, and Yates slept better than he had in years. The third day brought trouble. They were following the trail through an area of broken terrain, with rocky outcroppings and scattered pine trees, when Copper suddenly shied and snorted. Yates reined him in immediately, his hand going to the rifle in his saddle scabbard. "What is it?" Diana asked, keeping her voice low. "Not sure," Yates said, "but Copper does not spook easy." Then he smelled it, the sickly sweet smell of death on the cold air. His stomach sank. "Stay here," he told Diana. "Yates, no. If it is David, I need to see." He wanted to argue but knew it would be pointless. Together they guided their horses around a stand of trees and found the source of the smell. A dead horse, frozen and partially covered by snow. Yates dismounted and examined it carefully. "It has been dead maybe 2 weeks," he said. "Broke a leg, see? Someone put it down." He found the bullet hole in the animal's head. "Merciful kill." "Is it one of David's horses?" Diana's voice was tight. Yates checked the horse's brands and tack. "Could be. This is railroad property." He looked around the area more carefully, finding signs of a camp and then a trail leading away to the northeast. "Looks like after they lost the horse, they continued on foot. 2 sets of footprints. So they are alive," Diana said, relief flooding her voice. "They were alive then," Yates cautioned. 2 weeks ago. And traveling on foot in winter is dangerous." But privately he was encouraged. The surveyors had faced a setback but had kept going. That suggested determination and capability. They followed the new trail through the afternoon. The footprints were old and faint, mostly filled in by subsequent snowfall, but Yates could make them out. The men had been heading toward a series of limestone bluffs in the distance. "There might be caves in those bluffs," Yates said. "Good shelter." If they were smart, they would have holed up there. As they approached the bluffs, the sun was already starting to set. Yates scanned the rock face, looking for any sign of habitation, and then he saw it, a thin wisp of smoke rising from behind a large boulder. "There," he said, pointing. "Someone has a fire." They approached cautiously. It could be the surveyors, but it could also be anyone else taking shelter in the area. Yates kept his rifle ready as they climbed down from their horses and approached on foot. "Hello, the camp," Yates called out, using the traditional greeting. "We are friendly." There was a long pause, then a voice called back. "Who is there?" "My name is Yates Zimmerman. I am looking for David Brennan and Henry, 2 horses. Are you them?" Another pause, then a figure emerged from behind the boulder. He was young, maybe 25, with dark hair and a beard that looked like it had been growing for weeks. He was thin and favored one leg, but his eyes were sharp and intelligent. "I am David Brennan," he said cautiously. "Who are you really, and how do you know my name, David?" Diana pushed past Yates and ran to her brother. "David, it is me. It is Diana." David's suspicious expression transformed to shock, then joy. He caught his sister as she threw herself into his arms, and they held each other tightly. Yates stood back, feeling a profound sense of relief. They had found him. Against all odds, they had actually found him. A second man emerged from the shelter, older and darker skinned, with the weathered face of someone who spent his life outdoors. This would be Henry, 2 horses. He looked at Yates and nodded respectfully. "You came looking for us," Henry said. "It was not a question." "We did," Yates confirmed. "Your employers were not in a hurry, but Diana here was not willing to wait." David was still holding his sister, his face buried in her hair. "Diana, what are you doing here?" "You were supposed to wait in town. And who is this man?" "This is Yates Zimmerman," Diana said, pulling back to look at her brother. Her face was wet with tears. "He saved my life, David. I fell through the ice on the Smoky Hill River and he pulled me out. And when I told him you were missing, he volunteered to help find you. He brought me all the way out here." David looked at Yates with new appreciation. "Then I owe you more than I can ever repay, Mr. Zimmerman, both for saving my sister and for coming to look for us." "Just glad we found you alive," Yates said. "What happened? Why did you not make it back?" Over the next hour, as Diana and Yates shared their supplies and helped to build up the fire, David and Henry told their story. They had successfully completed their survey work, but were caught by an unexpected winter storm on their way back. One of their horses broke its leg, forcing them to travel on foot. Then David twisted his ankle badly, making travel even slower. "We made it to these bluffs and found this cave," David explained, gesturing to the opening behind them. "Figured it was better to wait out the worst of the winter here than try to hobble back and freeze to death on the prairie. We have been living on small game and the supplies we brought. It has not been comfortable, but we have survived. We were planning to start back in another week or so, once my ankle was better," David added. "I never imagined Diana would come out here looking for me." "I could not just sit in town not knowing," Diana said. "And I would not have made it without Yates. He has been wonderful." The way she said it, the way she looked at him when she said his name, did not escape David's notice. He looked between his sister and Yates with dawning understanding. "I see," he said slowly. "Well, this is quite a situation." They spent that night in the cave, which was surprisingly comfortable with all of them and a good fire going. David's ankle was healing but still weak, so they agreed to wait one more day before starting the journey back to Hayes City. This gave everyone time to rest and to get to know each other. Yates found himself liking David almost immediately. He was smart and practical, with a dry sense of humor that reminded Yates of Diana. Henry, Two Horses, was quieter but thoughtful, and he had clearly been a good companion to David during their ordeal. That evening, as Diana helped Henry prepare dinner, David pulled Yates aside for a private conversation. "Mr. Zimmerman," he began. "Yates, please. Yates, I need to ask you something directly, and I would appreciate an honest answer." "All right." "What are your intentions toward my sister?" Yates had been expecting this question. "I am in love with her," he said simply. "I know we have only known each other a few days, and I know that sounds crazy, but it is the truth. I want to court her properly with your permission. And if she will have me, I want to marry her someday." David studied him for a long moment. "You are serious?" "Completely." "My sister is all the family I have left in this world," David said. "She is smart, kind, and stronger than she looks. She deserves someone who will treat her well, who will respect her, who will be a true partner to her." "I know that," Yates said. "And I promise you, if she gives me the chance, I will spend every day trying to be worthy of her." David's stern expression softened into a slight smile. "She is already in love with you too. I can see it in how she looks at you, how she talks about you. My parents had that kind of love, that immediate recognition. I did not believe in it until I saw them together." He extended his hand. "You have my blessing, Yates. Take care of her." Yates shook his hand firmly. "I will. You have my word." Over the next 2 days, as they prepared for and then began the journey back to Hayes City, Yates watched David and Diana together. They were clearly close, with the easy affection of siblings who had been through hardship together. David was protective of Diana, but respected her strength and independence. He did not try to make decisions for her or dismiss her opinions. Yates found himself respecting the man more and more. The journey back was slower than the journey out, partly because of David's injured ankle and partly because there were more of them. But the weather held, and they made steady progress. At night, they made camp in the same spots Yates and Diana had used on the way out. Now, though, everything was different. David and Henry knew what had happened between Yates and Diana, and while they were discreet about giving them space, the knowledge changed the dynamic. On the third night of the return journey, when David and Henry had already retired to their bedrolls, Diana and Yates sat by the fire together. She was leaning against him, his arm around her shoulders, watching the flames dance. "I cannot believe we found him," Diana said softly. "When we saw that dead horse, I was so afraid. But we did find him," Yates said, "and he is all right, a little worse for wear, but all right." "Thanks to you," Diana said. She turned to look up at him. "Everything good in my life right now is thanks to you. You saved me from the river. You helped me find David. You gave me hope when I had none. How do I even begin to thank you for that?" "You do not need to thank me," Yates said. "Having you in my life is thanks enough." Diana reached up and pulled him down for a kiss. It was sweet and full of promise, the kiss of two people who knew they had found something rare and precious. "When we get back to Hayes City," Diana said when they broke apart, "I need to figure out what I am going to do. I have no job, very little money, and nowhere to live except Mrs. Kelly's boarding house." "You could stay there for now," Yates suggested. "And I was thinking, my ranch could use a bookkeeper, someone to manage the accounts, track the cattle, handle correspondence. I have been doing it myself, but I am not very good at it. It is a real job with real pay. And it would give you a reason to come out to the ranch regularly." Diana smiled. "You are offering me a job." "I am, if you want it. And even if you do not, we will figure something out. You are not alone anymore, Diana. You have David and you have me, and we are both going to make sure you are taken care of." "I do not need to be taken care of," Diana said, but there was no heat in it. "But I appreciate the offer. And yes, I would like the job. I am good with numbers, and I like the idea of learning about ranching." "Then it is settled," Yates said. "When we get back, I will introduce you to Pete and show you around the ranch." They arrived back in Hayes City on a cold afternoon in late January. The town looked exactly the same as when they had left, but Yates felt like a different person. He had left as a bachelor rancher looking to help a woman in need. He was returning as a man in love with a clear vision of his future. Mrs. Kelly nearly fainted when she saw Diana ride up Main Street, healthy and whole, with her brother beside her. The older woman rushed out of the boarding house and pulled Diana into a fierce hug. "I have been worried sick about you," Mrs. Kelly scolded. "Riding off into the wilderness in the middle of winter. You could have died." "But I did not," Diana said, laughing. "And we found David. Mrs. Kelly, this is my brother." The introductions and explanations took the rest of the afternoon. Doc Morrison checked over both David and Diana to make sure they had no lasting effects from their respective ordeals. The railroad office was notified that their missing surveyors had been found. Henry, 2 horses, reunited with his own family. And through it all, Yates stayed close to Diana, reluctant to let her out of his sight. That evening, as the sun set over Hayes City, Yates prepared to ride back to his ranch. Diana walked him to where Copper was tied. "I will come by in a few days," Yates said. "Give you time to rest and get settled with David." "A few days sounds like forever," Diana said, but she smiled. "But yes, that makes sense. David and I have a lot to talk about, and I need to help him figure out what he is going to do next." "Bring him out to the ranch when you come," Yates suggested. I would like to get to know him better, and Pete has been dying to meet you properly." "I will," Diana promised. She stepped closer and kissed him softly. "Thank you, Yates, for everything. For saving my life, for helping me find David, for believing in me, for loving me." "Easiest thing I have ever done," Yates said. "Loving you, I mean." He rode back to his ranch as the stars came out, his heart lighter than it had been in years. Pete took one look at his face and started grinning. "Well," the foreman said, "I see the trip was successful in more ways than one." "Shut up," Yates said, but he was smiling. Over the next few weeks, Diana became a regular presence at the Zimmerman ranch. She proved to be as good with numbers as she had claimed, quickly organizing Yates's chaotic records into neat ledgers. But more than that, she fit seamlessly into the life of the ranch. She learned the names of all the cattle, befriended the ranch hands, and even helped with some of the lighter work. David recovered fully from his ankle injury and decided to stay in Hays City. The railroad offered him a position as a supervisor, which paid better and kept him closer to town. He found a small house to rent on the edge of town and slowly began to build a life for himself. He and Yates became good friends, often meeting in town for drinks or meals. As winter slowly gave way to spring, Yates and Diana's relationship deepened. They were inseparable when she was at the ranch, working together during the day and sitting together in the evenings. Yates taught her to ride better, to rope cattle, to read the weather. Diana taught him to keep better records, to manage his money more carefully, to appreciate the small pleasures of life. And through it all, they fell more and more in love. It was not the dramatic, desperate love of their first meeting, but something deeper and more enduring. They learned each other's habits and quirks, their strengths and weaknesses. They laughed together, worked together, dreamed together. In April, on a warm spring evening with wildflowers blooming across the prairie, Yates took Diana to a spot on his property where a small creek ran through a stand of cottonwood trees. The setting sun painted the sky in brilliant colors, and the air was sweet with the smell of new grass. "Diana," Yates said, taking both her hands in his, "these past few months with you have been the happiest of my life. Every day I wake up grateful that you fell through that ice, as terrible as that sounds, because it brought you to me. I love you more than I thought it was possible to love someone. And I know I am just a simple rancher, and I cannot offer you fancy things or high society, but I can offer you my whole heart, my loyalty, and a life built together. Diana Brennan, will you marry me?" Diana's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "Yates Zimmerman, you saved my life in that frozen river, but what you have done since then is so much more. You have given me hope, purpose, joy, and love beyond measure. Yes, I will marry you. 1,000 times yes." Yates pulled out a simple gold ring that had been his mother's. It fit Diana's finger perfectly, as if it had been made for her. They kissed as the sun set, sealing their promise to each other. They were married in June in a small ceremony at the church in Hays City. David gave Diana away, his face full of pride and happiness. Mrs. Kelly wept through the entire service. Pete served as Yates's best man, and most of the town turned out to celebrate. Even Henry, 2 horses, came with his family to wish the couple well. After the wedding, Diana moved to the ranch permanently. She transformed the small ranch house into a real home, adding curtains and furniture and small touches that made it warm and welcoming. Yates had never realized how empty his house had been until Diana filled it with her presence. Their first year of marriage was not without challenges. There was a drought that summer that forced them to drive the cattle to better grazing land. Yates was injured when a horse threw him, breaking 2 ribs. Diana had a brief bout of illness in the fall that terrified them both. But they faced every challenge together, and each one seemed to strengthen their bond. David became a frequent visitor to the ranch, often staying for dinner or spending weekends helping with the work. He and Yates became like brothers, and Diana loved seeing the two most important men in her life become friends. David eventually began courting a schoolteacher named Margaret, and by the following spring, he was planning his own wedding. 2 years after their marriage, Diana gave birth to their first child. It was a difficult labor that lasted most of a day and night, with Doc Morrison in attendance and Yates wearing a path in the floorboards with his pacing. But when he finally heard his son's first cry, every moment of worry melted away. They named him Thomas, after Yates's father. The baby had Diana's brown eyes and Yates's dark hair, and from the moment Yates held his son, he was utterly besotted. Diana was an incredible mother, patient and loving and fierce in her protection of their child. Life settled into a new rhythm with Thomas in the house. The ranch continued to prosper under their joint management. Diana's bookkeeping and Yates's ranching skills proved to be a formidable combination. They hired more hands, expanded their herd, and bought additional land. The Zimmerman Ranch became one of the most successful operations in Ellis County. David married Margaret, and they soon had children of their own. The two families became incredibly close, celebrating holidays and birthdays together, helping each other through hard times, sharing in each other's joys. Thomas grew up with his cousins running wild around the ranch and the town, a whole clan of Brennans and Zimmermans. When Thomas was 3, Diana gave birth to a daughter they named Caroline, after Diana's mother. She had her mother's spirit and her father's stubbornness, and she wrapped Yates around her little finger from day one. 2 years after that came another son, James, who was quiet and thoughtful and loved the cattle more than anything. The years passed in a blur of activity and love. Yates and Diana grew older together, their bond deepening with each passing season. They had their arguments, of course, their moments of frustration and disagreement. But they always came back to each other, always remembered that cold January day when fate had brought them together. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Yates took Diana back to the spot by the creek where he had proposed. The cottonwood trees were taller now, and 3 children were playing nearby under Pete's watchful eye, but the place still felt magical. "You ever regret it?" Yates asked, holding her hand. "Staying here instead of going to some big city, having a more exciting life?" Diana looked at him like he was crazy. "Regret marrying you. Regret this life we have built. Yates, this is everything I ever wanted, even when I did not know I wanted it. You, our children, this ranch, this community. I would not trade it for anything in the world. Even though I am just a simple cowboy," Yates teased. "Especially because you are a simple cowboy," Diana said. "A simple cowboy who was brave enough and crazy enough to throw himself into a frozen river to save a stranger. That moment changed both our lives." "Best decision I ever made," Yates said. "Why did you risk your life that day?" Diana asked. It was the question she had asked him in Doc Morrison's office all those years ago, but now it held different weight. Yates thought about it seriously. "I think some part of me knew, even then, that you were going to be important to me. That I was not saving a stranger, but saving the woman I was meant to spend my life with. It sounds impossible, but it is the only explanation that makes sense." "My mother always said some souls are meant to find each other," Diana said, echoing her words from that cold night on the trail. "I think she was right. I think our souls recognized each other that day, even if our minds did not understand it yet." They stood there together as the sun set, watching their children play, and Yates felt a profound sense of gratitude. He had built a good life through hard work and determination, but Diana and their children were the heart of it all. They were what made every challenge worth facing, every hardship worth enduring. As the years continued to pass, the Zimmerman family became a pillar of the Hayes City community. Yates served on the town council and helped establish a proper school. Diana organized charity drives and helped newcomers get settled. Their children grew into fine young people who carried their parents' values of hard work, honesty, and compassion. Thomas eventually took over more and more of the ranch operations, learning from his father as Yates had learned from his grandfather. Caroline surprised everyone by becoming a teacher like her Aunt Margaret, though she never lost her love for riding and ranching. James became a veterinarian, the first in the county, and made his practice at the ranch where he could be close to the animals he loved. David and Margaret remained close neighbors and dear friends. When David's surveying work took him to new territories as the railroad expanded, Yates and Diana made sure Margaret and the children never wanted for anything. When Margaret fell ill one winter, Diana nursed her back to health. The bonds between the two families were unbreakable. On a warm summer evening, when Yates was 50 years old and Diana was 47, they sat on the porch of their home watching the sunset. Their hair was touched with gray now, and their bodies carried the wear of decades of hard work, but their love had not diminished. If anything, it had grown stronger, tempered by time and trials into something unbreakable. "You remember that first night on the trail?" Diana asked, her head resting on Yates's shoulder. "When we admitted we were falling in love." "I remember every detail," Yates said. "I was terrified I was taking advantage of you, that you only thought you cared for me because I had helped you." "I knew my own heart even then," Diana said. "Though I understand why you worried. It all happened so fast." "Best fast decision I ever made," Yates said. "Jumping into that river, going to look for David, courting you, marrying you. All of it." They sat in comfortable silence, watching as their youngest son rode across the pasture checking on the cattle. In the distance, they could see Thomas's house where he lived with his own wife and 2 children. The ranch had grown beyond what Yates had ever imagined possible, but more than that, it had become a true home filled with family and love. "I am so proud of what we have built," Diana said softly. "Not just the ranch, but our family, our life. Everything we have accomplished together." "Could not have done any of it without you," Yates said honestly. "You took a struggling ranch and a stubborn cowboy and turned us both into something better." "We made each other better," Diana corrected. "That is what love does, Yates. It challenges us and supports us and helps us become the best versions of ourselves." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Yates thought back to that cold January day 27 years ago when he had seen a woman fall through the ice. He had acted on instinct, risking his life without thought or hesitation. And that single moment of courage or foolishness or fate had given him everything that mattered. He had saved Diana from the frozen river, but in so many ways, she had saved him too. She had saved him from loneliness, from a life half lived, from never knowing the depth of love and connection 2 people could share. They had saved each other, and in doing so, they had built something beautiful and lasting. "Why did you risk your life?" Diana had asked him that day in Doc Morrison's office, and again years later by the creek. Now, with the wisdom of age and experience, Yates knew the answer with certainty. He had risked his life because love had called to him across the ice, because destiny had demanded he act, because some souls are meant to find each other no matter the obstacles in their way. He had risked his life for love, though he had not known it at the time. And he would do it again in a heartbeat, 1,000 times over, for every moment of joy and partnership and deep connection they had shared. "I love you," Yates said, pulling Diana closer. "Every day for the rest of my life I will love you." "And I love you," Diana replied. forever and always. The years continued to roll forward, each season bringing its own challenges and joys. Yates and Diana grew older together, their hair turning silver, their bodies slowing down but their spirits remaining vibrant. They became grandparents multiple times over, delighting in watching their children raise families of their own. The ranch remained in the family, passed down through the generations as Yates's father had intended. Each new generation added their own improvements and innovations, while maintaining the core values of hard work, fairness, and respect for the land and animals. Yates and Diana made sure their grandchildren knew the story of how they met, though they softened some of the scarier details for the younger ones. The tale of the cowboy who jumped into a frozen river to save a drowning woman became a family legend, told and retold at gatherings and celebrations. As they moved into their 60s and then 70s, Yates and Diana gradually handed over the day-to-day operations of the ranch to Thomas and his siblings. But they never stopped working entirely. Diana still kept the books, and Yates still rode out to check on the cattle, though at a slower pace than before. They took time to do things they had always been too busy for. They traveled to Denver to see the mountains. They visited Margaret after David died, supporting her through her grief as she had supported them through their challenges. They spent long evenings on the porch, holding hands and watching the sunset, content in each other's company. When Yates was 72, he fell ill with pneumonia. It was the same winter sickness that had taken his mother all those years ago, and for several terrifying days, Diana thought she might lose him. She barely left his bedside, wiping his fevered brow, making sure he took his medicine, praying harder than she had ever prayed before. "You are not allowed to leave me," she told him fiercely one night when the fever was at its worst. "I saved you from that river just as much as you saved me, and I am not done with you yet, Yates Zimmerman. Do you hear me? I am not done." Whether it was her fierce will or his own stubborn refusal to give up, Yates pulled through. The illness left him weaker, but his mind remained sharp, and his love for Diana never wavered. "You are terrifying when you are determined," he told her once he was well enough to tease. "Remind me never to make you truly angry." "You would not dare," Diana said, but she was smiling through her tears of relief. They had 10 more years together after that scare, 10 precious years of continued life and love. They saw their children become grandparents themselves, making them great-grandparents. They celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary with a huge party that brought together the entire extended family and most of Hays City. At that party, with 3 generations of family surrounding them, Yates stood up to make a toast. His body was old and worn, but his voice was steady and strong. 50 years ago, I married the bravest, smartest, most beautiful woman I had ever met," he said, looking at Diana with eyes full of love. "She had already nearly died once, and fool that I was, I thought I was saving her. But the truth is, she saved me. She gave me a reason to be better, to work harder, to love deeper. She gave me children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She gave me a life worth living. Diana, you are the love of my life, and I thank God every day for that frozen river that brought you to me." There was not a dry eye in the room as Diana stood up and kissed him, and the assembled family erupted in applause and cheers. 2 years later, in the early spring when the prairie was just beginning to green and the cottonwood trees were budding, Yates died peacefully in his sleep with Diana's hand in his. He was 84 years old and had lived a full, rich life surrounded by love. Diana grieved deeply, as anyone would who had lost their life partner. But she was not alone. Her children and grandchildren rallied around her, supporting her through the loss just as she had supported them through their own challenges over the years. She lived for 5 more years after Yates's death, years spent with her family, tending her garden and keeping his memory alive. She told stories about him to the great-grandchildren who had been too young to remember him well. She made sure everyone knew about the brave cowboy who had not hesitated to risk his life to save a stranger. When Diana passed away peacefully at the age of 86, surrounded by her loving family, she was buried next to Yates on a hill overlooking the ranch they had built together. The headstones were simple, bearing their names and dates, but also an inscription that Diana had requested. 2 souls meant to find each other, together forever. The ranch continued to prosper under the care of their descendants, and the story of Yates and Diana became a cherished family history. Each new generation learned about the frozen river, the dramatic rescue, the search for Diana's brother, and the deep, abiding love that had sustained 2 people through decades of life together. Hays City grew and changed over the years, evolving from a rough frontier town to a modern city. But the Zimmerman Ranch remained, a testament to hard work, family values, and the power of love to transform lives. And sometimes, on cold winter evenings, when the Smoky Hill River froze over and the stars shone bright above Kansas, people swore they could see 2 figures walking together along the creek by the cottonwood trees. A man and a woman, holding hands, forever together as they had always been meant to be. The story of the cowboy who saved a woman from a frozen river became more than just a family legend. It became a reminder that sometimes in a single moment of courage, lives are forever changed. That sometimes, when we risk everything for another person, we find everything we never knew we needed. That love can bloom in the most unexpected circumstances, and once rooted, can weather any storm. Yates had asked himself many times over the years why he had risked his life that day. The answer was both simple and profound, because some things are worth the risk. Love is worth the risk. Life is worth the risk. And when you find the person who makes your soul come alive, you do whatever it takes to save them, to hold them, to build a life with them. Diana had asked him the same question, first in confusion and fear, later in wonder and gratitude. And through their 52 years of marriage, through every challenge and triumph, through raising children and building a legacy, the answer remained constant. He had risked his life for love, though he had not known it at the time. He had risked his life because destiny called and he had answered. He had risked his life for all the moments that would come after the first kiss, the wedding, the birth of their children, the quiet evenings on the porch, the laughter and tears and everything in between. He had risked his life for a lifetime of love, and it had been worth every single moment. And in the end, that was the real story. Not just of a dramatic rescue on a frozen river, but of 2 people who found each other against all odds, built a life together through hard work and dedication, and loved each other with a depth and devotion that lasted beyond death itself. The Zimmerman Ranch stood as a testament to their love, passed down through generations who carried their values and their story. The family they created spread across Kansas and beyond, each member carrying a piece of Yates and Diana's legacy within them. And on warm summer evenings, when the family gathered for reunions and celebrations, someone would always tell the story again. The story of the cowboy and the frozen river, of instant recognition and enduring love, of 2 souls who were always meant to find each other. It was a story worth telling, a love worth celebrating, a life worth living. And it all began with one question, asked in wonder and answered in truth. Why did you risk your life for love? Always, eternally, completely for love.